I don't know.
All right.
No, okay.
Well, we can. Okay. Cool.
So,
Yeah.
welcome to the Lawyer Dan Show at CPAC. I have Jim Pfaff. Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did.
Yes,
You did.
Jim Pfaff. He is the president of the House Caucus.
No, the Conservative Caucus.
Excuse me. The president of the Conservative Caucus.
Yeah, theconservativecaucus.org. And we're national grassroots organization. We're actually the oldest conservative grassroots organization in the country.
Oh, wow.
Founded in 1974 by Howard Phillips, one of the kind of the founders of the post-Goldwater conservative movement. But we've really kind of grown up to now where we're doing a lot of, we did about a bunch of Trump independent expenditure work, which I can talk about in the last election.
Sure.
We'll be doing a bunch in 2026. But we're building out a national grassroots network, congressional district by congressional district.
Excellent.
To try to get the right people in Congress.
Good. So we've been talking several of the other guests about it's great that Trump has won, but this is just the beginning. And we can't think that the war is won, because otherwise what's going to happen is the pendulum will swing, because the Democrats are now real motivated and we'll lose all the ground and progress that we've got. We've got an election for Congress coming in 2 years that's going to be critical. Yep. Otherwise, we've got 23 months for Donald Trump to get everything done.
Yeah. And listen, I tell people all the time, having worked on Capitol Hill for as long as I did, and I was a chief of staff for two congressmen, Thomas Massey and Tim Huelskamp from Kansas. And what we always were dealing with were people who have ideas about how they'd like people to perceive them that don't include actually accomplishing anything. And as we were talking about before we got going, Donald Trump, the advent of Donald Trump on the political stage in the Republican Party is really amazing. In fact, one of the reasons that so many Republican Trump derangement syndrome people became that way, it's not just because of some of the issues.
It's because he's effective.
It's because he actually expects things to be done too.
Correct.
Not only is he effective, he expects it to be done. So he judges people by the accomplishment that they have.
Correct.
This is an essentially American ideal that politicians in Washington, D.C. rarely exhibit.
Correct.
It is fundamentally necessary. And so I always tell people, your favorite person you're watching on whatever national network, that you're like, rah, rah, rah. Yeah, that's an amazing thing that they just said on whatever major news network. 9 times out of 10, that ain't really who they are. They're just telling you that because they want to be reelected. They want to be thought of as the hero. And they're really not. And I see that constantly, even to this day, even now that I don't work on that. So.
Candidates that are going to say what they mean and mean what they say.
Well, the best way to do that is to find state legislators who are already doing the same thing.
Demonstrated it already.
By the way, it's not a perfect science. There have been some of those people who've come up to Washington and greatly disappointed. But the best indicator of whether someone's going to actually come up and do what they say is that very thing. You have seen that with people like Jim Jordan was a state legislator before he came up.
Amazing.
Jim's fantastic. I consider him a friend, and he's a good man. I've done a lot of work with him.
We'd love to have him on the show if you can get him on.
Great. I'm glad I'll talk. It'd be awesome if he worked. But it's people like that. He's a good example of how that works. Mm-hmm. But you also will get some other people. I have come to the point where I'm very positive about having people who built businesses that were very successful. I worked for Thomas Massey. Mm-hmm. He had built a very large business that he grew from his time at MIT when he was studying engineering. And it's actually a technology that is in extreme use right now. It's a haptic sensation methodology where you can go into a virtual world and you can this is a technology that's actually training people how to deal with, for example, pipeline ruptures and how to do that and practice it at first, because once you get into that environment, it's hard to actually do it.
Yeah.
For example, that's just one example. But anyway, he built this company, sold it. He made it grow over a 20-year period, and then he ran for Congress. I mean, that's more Trumpian than anything else. And but what really bothers me, the two things, and as a evangelical Christian, the two things that really bother me the most is pastors and former military officers.
Going into Congress and then...
Yes. Rarely do they end up being very good. They
Interesting.
typically end up doing what people think in this town, and it's really frustrating.
Why?
Well, because in the case of military officers, because what was a good instinct in them when they were in the military, follow orders, follow directions,
Right.
does not work well in this town.
Interesting.
You've got to be a maverick to be able to stop the crap that's happening. Again, another virtue of Donald Trump that works.
Well, I would think that CEOs of companies would be good in that position because they have to make it's all up to their decision making, and so they have to make their vision a reality.
Yeah.
And they know what's going to conform to that or not.
And I would not say so much CEOs, although those like Rick Scott have become really great. Ron Johnson, though, is also a good example. He's an entrepreneur. Like, he had to build it from the start up.
Yeah.
And one of the great problems in Washington, D.C. is how difficult it is for people to start a business and to grow a business, to get it off the ground, to build its foundation well and give it an opportunity for success. And we've been doing that more poorly in this country in recent decades than we have in the past, and particularly in the 19th century, even through the 50s, almost to the 70s. But then we got into this regulatory framework where these unique things like climate change and then eventually, as we've come to now, DEI, that all these things they want to insert into the business environment, when really what a business is about is literally making money and building a product that people, or a service that people want to take on.
It's a service.
It is, and
whether it's a product or it's provide value to the marketplace.
That's right. And people in this town don't.
They just take value from the marketplace.
Exactly right.
It's the exact opposite.
So I look to those kind of people personally. That doesn't mean a pastor or a former military officer can't be good. Some of them have been, but the batting average is low. So we need to change this paradigm. We need to understand this. I'll tell you, one of the most corrupting influences in this town is not, and this is from my experience working on Capitol Hill and seeing these people, knowing most of them. One of the most corrupting influences is not so much that they were wealthy and they're rigging the system for themselves. It's that they aren't wealthy. They leave their career to become congressman. You literally have to throw it all away.
Oh, yeah.
There's no time.
Right.
Honestly, no time.
Right.
But then once you go into that, particularly if you're in your 30s or 40s, suddenly you better keep it, or else you got to start literally from scratch again.
Right.
That's a corrupting influence.
This
is why
no question.
You're seeing the Nancy Pelosi becoming a multimillionaire type thing, and other members of Congress on these insider trading deals. Because if they want to build wealth, the only way they can do it is in a corrupt fashion. There's no time to do it in a different fashion.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I will not go into politics until I feel like I am wealthy enough to defend on my own dime the onslaught that will come, because I know how effective I would be.
Yeah.
And so maybe in a decade, maybe, maybe in 2 decades from now, then I'll consider it. But I've got a lot of wealth to build because, I need Trumpian level of wealth, because I'm not going to let that corrupt me.
Well, what's really interesting to me about Donald Trump, what I knew about Donald Trump before he decided to run for president in 2016 was, on the outside, no one had really picked him down to the bone, so to speak. Right. So I didn't know precisely how moral it was in business practices or whatever. And there was reason to believe in the New York City market that some corrupting influences were there. And they obviously are. And he dealt with the whatever. But what we have found out about this guy, amazingly, even me, is that the guy's pretty pristine in his approach to his business practices. I would judge his moral character in his entire career as a businessman as much higher than average for the type of work he does.
Absolutely.
Especially. Yeah, exactly. So, and you hear numerous stories about how well he treated people that worked for him, of all races, creeds, and colors, by the way. Seemed to be really good that way. He's got his imperfections, and I get that. But Sorry, 6,000 years of recorded human history proves
Yeah, show me a
the
perfect
moral
person.
depravity of man. I mean, we're just
Right?
not a perfect race, right? But what's interesting is he hasn't been corrupted in the politics in any way. But Nancy Pelosi, on the other hand,
Oh, God.
she's highly corrupt in the politics.
Nothing but.
It's very interesting dynamic. We have been taught for a century now or more that wealthy people are always taking advantage of others. And that's not to say that there aren't wealthy people who are. But right now, in this day and age, and again, it's not perfect. There are corrupt wealthy people, of course, and some of whom might run for office, but your batting average is better because these are people who have to work through a whole lot. And there's only one way to become like a billionaire. If you're sitting out and saying, I'd love to become a billionaire, well, what do you have to do? You have to find a product that other people want to buy. You have to make that product of a high quality or service.
Mm-hmm.
You have to please your customers. You have to go back to your customers and ask them what they liked and disliked, and then seek ways to improve it. You need to have an employee base that likes working for you and tends to stay longer so you can keep. So all of a sudden, what are you doing to become and if you're the greediest jerk in the world, what is it that you ended up having to do at the end of the day? Even if you remain greedy, you have to follow the golden rule.
Right.
That there's something about that. Again, not perfect, right? There are bad people out there in every sphere of life. But you find out that to become really wealthy, you have to follow some form of goodness, even if you're faking it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think that more times than not, more than 50% of the time, you might even be better with the wealthy person. I have known members of Congress who were scared to death of losing their next election. And when you get into
personally, financially, if you're scared that you're going to lose the election and you're going to be in a bad financial situation and your wife is going to divorce you or your husband's going to divorce you and you can't afford to send your kids to the school or anything.
Yeah.
How can you not be enslaved by that? Essentially,
that's right. Exactly. And
you're a servant.
That's right.
But you're the wrong type of servant. You're subjected to it instead of the master over the position, to where you do the right thing and it doesn't. You're not having to make this tremendous personal sacrifice for it.
Right. There are only two ways to make money in that environment if you don't already have it. Either insider trading, right, as we've had so well documented, or you need to vote the right way so you can get that lobbying job that'll pay you $300,000 or $400,000 a year, which a lot of them actually do. So this doesn't explain everything, but I hope I'm giving people insight into why this is such a problem, or at least some of the reasons why.
It does.
So,
well, Jim, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here. We definitely need to stay in touch, and
appreciate it.
God bless you on the work that you're doing.
Thanks. And listen, people can go to theconservativecaucus.org if they want to get involved in their community and or in their state and figure out how to do it. We're going to help them with that.
Excellent.
But
so theconservativecaucus.org.
Yep.
And we appreciate the message. So we're here live from CPAC. Stay tuned for more. Make sure you've subscribed, tell us what you think in the comments, and make sure you got that bell turned on so that you can see the alert when we go live here in just a few minutes with our next guest. This is the Lawyer Dana Show. Thank you very much, Jim.
Right.